The father of freed American teenage hostage Natalie Raanan says she's doing well after her release Friday by Hamas. Today is Saturday, October 21st, 2023, and this is The Dunkley Report. The father of freed American teenage hostage Natalie Raanan says she's doing well after her release Friday by Hamas. Yuri Raanan of Illinois told the Associated Press that he spoke to his daughter by telephone. He said, "She's doing good. She's doing very good. I'm in tears and I feel very, very good." The 71-year-old said he saw on the news Friday that an American mother and daughter would be released from Hamas, and he spent the day hoping they meant his daughter and her mother, Judith Raanan. He said he hopes both will be back in the U.S. next week. The Israeli government said Hamas militants on Friday freed 2 Americans. Judith Raanan and her 17-year-old daughter Natalie are from suburban Chicago. They had been held hostage in Gaza since militants rampaged through Israel 2 weeks ago. The pair, who also hold Israeli citizenship, were the first hostages to be released of the roughly 200 people who were abducted. Hamas said it released them for humanitarian reasons in an agreement with the Qatari government. Relatives of other captives appealed for more to be freed. The release comes amid growing expectations of an Israeli ground offensive into Gaza, and as authorities inched closer to bringing aid from Egypt to desperate Gazan families and hospitals. 50 years after the 1973 Arab oil embargo, the current crisis in the Middle East has the potential to disrupt global oil supplies and raise prices. But don't expect a repeat of the catastrophic price hikes and long lines at the gasoline pump, experts say. The head of the International Energy Agency said the latest Israel-Hamas war is definitely not good news for oil markets already stretched by cutbacks in oil production from Saudi Arabia and Russia and expected stronger demand from China. Benchmark crude traded at $93 a barrel on Friday, up from $85 the day before Hamas attacked Israel, killing hundreds of civilians. Belgium's justice minister has resigned after it was discovered that Tunisia was seeking the extradition last year of an Islamic extremist who shot dead 2 Swedes and wounded a 3rd this week. Abdesalem Lasoued was fatally shot after gunning down the men with a semi-automatic rifle on Monday night. The attack forced the lockdown of more than 35,000 people in a soccer stadium where they had gathered to watch Belgium play Sweden. Justice Minister Vincent van Quickenborne said Friday that Tunisia had sought the shooter's arrest last year, and that through a monumental error, Belgian authorities had failed to act upon the demand. Gaza has long been a powder keg, and it exploded after Hamas fighters stormed southern Israel on October 7th and began killing and abducting people. More than 1,400 people in Israel have been killed since the Hamas attack, mostly civilians slain during the incursion that also led to around 200 hostages being taken into Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli airstrikes have killed more than 4,000 Palestinians. According to Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry, Israel has imposed a complete siege on Gaza, preventing the entrance of food, water, and fuel. As Israel gears up for a ground invasion and pledges to topple Hamas, the futures of Gaza and the more than 2 million Palestinians who call it home look uncertain. Near Oz is one of more than 20 towns and villages in southern Israel that were ambushed in the sweeping assault by Hamas on October 7th. In many, the devastation left behind is shocking. but it is clear that near Oz, a kibbutz on a low rise overlooking the border fence, with Gaza suffered a particularly harsh toll. It was home to about 400 people, many employed growing asparagus and other crops in an oasis of greenery surrounded by the Negev desert. Now, it is virtually devoid of the people who gave it life. The Israeli military and a pair of surviving residents led a group of journalists, including an Associated Press reporter, on a tour of the battered village. Many Palestinians in Gaza who heeded the Israeli military's warning last week to head south thought they were fleeing to a safer place. But they watched as dozens of people like them were killed by Israeli airstrikes raining down on residential buildings and United Nations shelters outside the evacuation zone. One of those families that fled Gaza City only to face bombardment in the southern city of Khan Yunis decided to return home. The explosions followed them. An airstrike struck the home of engineer Omar Kodari, killing him and 2 of his children. Russian media report a Russian-American journalist was ordered detained for another 3 days on charges of failing to register as a foreign agent. The state news agency TASS says Alsu Kurmasheva, an editor for the U.S. government-funded Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty, appeared in court in the central Russian city of Kazan. She is the second U.S. journalist detained in Russia this year after Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich was arrested on espionage charges in March. The state-run news website Tatar Inform said Kurmasheva was collecting information on Russian military activities and could receive up to 5 years in prison. Her lawyer said she is not guilty of the charges. Wall Street closed out its worst week in a month with more losses. The S&P 500 fell 1.3% Friday. The Dow lost 286 points, and the Nasdaq Composite dropped 1.5%. The stock market has been under pressure from the bond market, where the yield on the 10-year Treasury briefly touched 5%. Thursday evening, for the first time since 2007. High yields make borrowing more expensive for everyone, and they slow the economy while dragging on investment prices. The 10-year yield eased Friday, but only after hanging near 4.99% in the morning. Crude oil prices fluctuated and gold's price rose. Hurricane Norma is heading for the resorts of Los Cabos at the southern tip of Mexico's Baja California peninsula, while Tammy grew into a hurricane in the Atlantic. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says Tammy's maximum sustained winds grew to 80 miles per hour, that Norma had 120 miles per hour. Maximum sustained winds, and was located about 145 miles south of Cabo San Lucas. The Category 3 storm was moving northwest at 9 miles per hour. Norma was expected to weaken only slightly before it hits land. Hotels in Los Cabos remained about 3/4 full of tourists, but beaches were closed and some flights were canceled. Today's news was reported by the Associated Press. This has been the World News for Saturday, October 21st, 2023. Thanks again for joining us at The Dunkley Report.